Let me pull this story up here, and then we'll talk about U.S. and China. Axios reports Americans increasingly see China as an enemy. Overall, 55% view America as a competitor. So you were right earlier. I was wrong. You mentioned it was about 34% viewed as an enemy. Among Republicans, 53% view China as an enemy, and only 20% of Democrats, but it's about a third of Americans see China as an enemy. Perhaps not enough for any real conflict, but at least in that regard, with China now demonizing the United States, I wonder if this is a step towards a potential military conflict. I don't know where you guys your views are right now between that scenario happening.
Well, so for a point of context, the situation in Hong Kong, the Chinese Communist Party has been very successful at completely annihilating any trace of democracy in Hong Kong. Once Hong Kong is taken care of to the Communist Party's satisfaction, the next goal is Taiwan. And that is something that will draw in the entire world. The U.S. has made obligations to defend Taiwan in the event of any kind of invasion. And Taiwan is a very strategic location in the region. So sooner or later, we are going to see Taiwan become a flashpoint. But
is Biden going to actually protect Taiwan?
Well, I don't know.
I'd say no.
He was the first president to have essentially what is the Taiwanese ambassador. They're not called an ambassador because of the one China, whatever.
Yeah.
But he was the first president to have this Taiwanese representative come to the inauguration. He has carried on freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea and in the Taiwan Strait. So he's done all of those things. He hasn't explained what his China policy is. So in many ways, the Biden administration has said many of the right things, but they haven't done much yet.
Yeah,
and it is 6 weeks in.
6 weeks, right.
And even the Trump administration, it took a while for that administration's China policy to kind of crystallize for a variety of reasons.
Looking at the U.S. migrant crisis that's happening right now, and I'm not assuming you guys know a lot about it, but Joe Biden is getting a lot of criticism from the left and the right. It's typically being seen as a dramatic failure by both political parties. Obviously, there are establishment Democrats who are supportive of Joe Biden. Republican Party, Trump populist types, they're super critical, and left populists are looking at Joe Biden as though he's failing miserably in this regard because he's not really getting anything done. He's not helping the migrants in a capacity where they'll be able to come in here and get health care and get access. Well, they're kind of coming in and being released. It's not all that great. Some are being deported, but then the Trump supporters see it as he's not doing anything to stop it. I only bring that up because I have to wonder if that's something that we really can see and understand as Americans. We understand the border. We understand the arguments made around it. Is that a sign of Joe Biden's leadership on other issues as well, which may, reflect on what could happen with China?
Well, I think from things that have been said, and again, this is things that have been said and not done, they talk about diplomacy, cooperating with China. China might be a rival or a competitor, but we need to cooperate with them on climate change, et cetera, et cetera. But the fundamental issue is when you look at the Chinese Communist Party as a regime that is committing genocide, and that, as we can see in the case of Hong Kong, lies about any promise it makes, how can you cooperate? How can you be diplomatic with this kind of monstrous authoritarian regime? So it blows the fundamental premise of what he's said out of the water.
I think the danger for the U.S. and the Biden administration here is that they are going to want to differentiate themselves so much from the Trump administration that they have to be like, well, we are going to be diplomats. We're going to talk about diplomacy. We're going to talk about cooperation. This whole line about China being a rival, but we have to still cooperate on shared goals is one that's consistently been said by every Biden nominee that's gone up in front of Senate hearings or whatever. So you have to say this is the line from the Biden administration. The problem is that's not what the Chinese Communist Party means by cooperate. The word in Chinese, it just kind of means exchange in any way. So it could be just the cooperation doesn't mean we're going to both work together on climate change. It means if you want me to do something about climate change, what are you going to give up? What are you going to give me?
I don't think they're going to do anything.
Happen?
I think it's duplicitousness.
Oh yeah,
they're going to say, "Don't worry, America, we got you. You give us the $1 billion, and then we'll get right on it." Thanks to the billion. And then they're what $1 billion?
So the promise was in 4 decades we'll be carbon neutral.
Yeah.
Or like
As they're building more
right.
coal-fired power
Exactly.
plants.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've seen challenges with cooperating with the Chinese Communist Party in the past. If you look at the George W. Bush administration, they initially took a tough stance on the Communist Party, but after 9/11, they're like, well, we have to work with the Communist Party on fighting the biggest threat, which at the time was terrorism. And so the idea is we're going to work with China to fight global terrorism. And what did China do? They didn't cooperate towards America's goals on fighting terrorism. They basically used it as an excuse to go after their Chinese Muslims, like the Uyghurs, right? The Obama administration then said, oh, we have to cooperate with China on climate change. And, what happened? Well, China signed, the Paris agreement, but ultimately, what did China actually do was build a huge number of coal-fired power plants, releasing massive amounts of carbon. They ramped up their carbon emissions while using the excuse of being a developing country. But on top of that, they also stole the renewable energy technology from U.S. companies, wind power technology and solar technology. And now if you want to buy a solar panel in America, you're basically buying one that's made in China from knocked off American technology.
No.
And that's how the Communist Party cooperates on climate change.
That is it's also powered by coal.
Right. So
When they build
hold on, you're ragging on China coming down real hard over the burning of this carbon and all that stuff. But they did build that big TV thing, right? That showed the sunrise.
Oh, I know that picture.
Yeah. There's all the smog in the air. You got to give them credit for at least giving people a glimmer of hope, right? It can't just be a dreary post-apocalyptic smog wasteland.
Xi Jinping promised he's going to transform China into a moderately prosperous society. Big goals.
I gotta say, I think I feel like the U.S. has already lost. I think we're in a propaganda war, an information war, an economic war, and we are. I don't think the physical confrontation matters as much. If it comes to a point where Taiwan knows the U.S. has become too weak to actually defend it, and their option is allow China to come in or die, I mean, I feel like they might just be like, well, we've got no defense anymore, we've got no leverage, that's it, we're China now.
It's hard to say because they know what it would mean for Taiwan is they become the next Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is looking more and more a little less like Shanghai and a little more like Xinjiang. That was a point you made the other day, where it's very.
What does that mean?
It means like it's basically like when the Chinese Communist Party is turning Hong Kong into another Chinese city, they're not turning it into like Shanghai or Beijing, like one of their showpiece cities. They're turning it into Xinjiang, which is basically an open air prison.
Right.
Like there was like all of the crackdowns in Hong Kong now, like they're basically going to essentially strip out all the democracy that existed. Like no more being able to vote for people in the legislature. Like it's just they're completely dismantling it. And there was maybe a bill that's going to come up in front of the legislature that is now completely controlled by pro-Beijing officials that would allow the Hong Kong government to stop people from leaving Hong Kong.
Wow.
Like, so that then it really does become like a giant prison.
And there is no prominent Hong Kong activist they're all either in jail or in exile at this point.
Yeah, and a lot of people we had interviewed in Hong Kong just a year and a half ago are in jail now.
Wow.
Yeah. So really, what happens in Taiwan will determine whatever happens for the next.
But I mean, you look
50
at
years.
these American companies. That's why I say it. That who, was it LeBron James who came out and defended China, and then you had was it Steve Kerr? I think it was. Well, we don't talk about Black Lives Matter, or or they don't talk about Black, so we're not going to talk about what's going on over there. And it's like, dude, they're concentration camps. Like, it's a big difference. You got.
And the NBA has a training camp in Xinjiang, and Disney thanked.
Yeah, we talked about that.
All these industries, they make so much more money there. You got to look at who owns these big companies and their access to wealth. American companies. I shouldn't even call them American companies necessarily. They're multinational corporations at this point, and the people in charge of them are like, I'm rich, I can do whatever I want, and no one will stop me. Why would I care about anybody else?
I mean, BlackRock has this whole webpage about unleashing the potential of Chinese bonds. Like, yeah.
But what does that mean?
It means, like, invest your money in China.
Yeah.
Pump up the regime.
Yeah, you'll invest your money in China. You'll get back a good return, and you will sell out everyone else into serfdom or slave labor.
If China takes Taiwan, China becomes a superpower. It's no longer the U.S. is more powerful. It would be a tremendous loss
I think
for
this is,
democracy worldwide.
Yeah, this is what Xi Jinping was saying about the, West is in decline, the East is rising.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah. So that's, but at the same time saying that the U.S. is the biggest threat to China.
Yeah.
So,
More like the U.S. is the dominant power around the world, and it's who needs to be displaced if China is to take over.
What about the EU? They'll stand up.
My understanding is that the goal of the European Union was to compete with China because they saw, how quickly it was rising, and they needed some kind of united force.
They're not succeeding at that.
No, they're not.
Their goal.
That's yep.
And that has to do with the manufacturing and corporate power of Germany in particular, being very interested in developing relationships with China. Angela Merkel has been very supportive of that. And
Volkswagen went into China in like 1978 or 79, like the first Western company to go into China.
Volkswagen has a bad history.
Well, all of these companies that go into China, they create a Chinese communist division within the company for the Communist Party.
So if you have 50 or more employees, then you're required by Chinese law to have a party branch within your company. And this applies not just to Chinese companies, but also to foreign companies.
Foreign companies also have to work with a Chinese company by law.
So they need a partner. And until recently, it had to be a majority partner, 51% majority. And so essentially, the foreign company can operate, but there are certain things that they can and can't do according to the party whims. And the party is in there with every major decision. So like McDonald's having a party branch in China does it's hard to understand what that would really mean. But when it comes to Volkswagen, so their party branch is going to help arrange things like cheap labor, for example, or Nike, will have a party branch, and maybe there's certain political things that Nike can't say, and there's also possibly the help that they give for, you get very cheap labor from Uyghurs who don't have much choice.
Well, this is why Nike was fighting against a forced labor bill that would have potentially gotten them in trouble for using forced labor in Xinjiang. Not that they were directly using it, but because of the web of how many of you source something from this person who sorts something from this company down the line, and then somewhere along the line, there's Uyghur slave labor. I
mean, it was so easy and cheap, so they decided to just do it.
It's not just Uyghur slave labor. There's a lot of prison labor. There's just a lot of kind of dissident prison labor. It's not just the Uyghurs. It's just that the Uyghurs are the biggest population.
Right.
It's a very visible in a way that
because they're an ethnic minority, so you can kind of tell who they are
in one region too. Versus just so the issue with Falun Gong was they were just anybody. They're just people who do the Qigong practice, and so they blended in. They weren't in one location, so you couldn't see this is this specific concentration camp where they're putting them.
Right.
So.
This sounds horrible.
Yeah. we do not want the Chinese Communist Party as a superpower leading the world.
I don't think we can do anything. I think is it pessimistic to say it's over? What do you guys think?
I think it is pessimistic. There has been, we all know the Trump administration was a bit controversial. China was one of the few bipartisan issues. I would imagine the Biden administration said it's reviewing the Trump administration designation of what's happening to the Uyghurs as genocide. I can't imagine it would be politically feasible for Biden to come out and say, well, maybe it isn't genocide. I just can't imagine that happening.
He came out and said, well, there are cultural differences in China. And
what he said was wrong for many reasons, not quite that. He has been clear about condemning what the treatment of the Uyghurs.
I don't think he'll use the word genocide personally.
Not yet.
Yeah, because it's just like how the Canadian Parliament recently voted that it was genocide,
right.
But Trudeau and his entire cabinet basically just didn't show up for the vote.
Yeah,
because they were the government abstains.
I can actually understand and respect why Joe Biden would not do that, because he needs to go in and be able to have some kind of relationship to actually have influence in a certain capacity. However, while I can understand that, and same is true for Trump when he would go negotiate, why is he talking to Kim Jong-un or whatever? What is he going to do? Throw a bomb first? It's at a certain point, there's a line. We got to figure out how we stop these things. I mean, the gulags in North Korea are nightmarish, and the genocide and the concentration camps in China are probably the worst possible thing, we could imagine existing in terms of what a human could do to another human. How do we stop it? If we don't have a president who's willing to say, that's the line. The line shouldn't the line for I don't care if it's Trump or Biden, be literal genocide? He should say it. Shouldn't Trudeau say it?
Well, as you say, it prevents them from having any kind of diplomacy, quote unquote.
Yeah, but the way I see it is when you enter into genocide, is diplomacy really soft diplomacy? I mean, you can still have diplomacy to a certain degree. You could have we're sanctioning you. We're making demands. You end this now, or else, because this is a red line. But we have we have Trudeau and Biden who are like, well, now hold on there,
Yeah, you need to have red lines that there are consequences for crossing those red lines.
And I think
we had all the red lines with Syria. Yeah.
Well, I think with the genocide, this is why genocide is such a touchy issue. It's if Western democracies, and now the Dutch parliament has come out and also called it a genocide, if they actually start using the word genocide, then it becomes a lot harder for not just like leaders of countries to just act like China's a normal country, but also, Wall Street, for businesses, because really the thing that we can do to stop China is to cut off the money.
Yeah.
That is the
Number
number
one.
They won't
one
do
thing.
it.
Yeah.
You have all these special interests, like we mentioned, the NBA. You had Blizzard, the Hearthstone thing with Free Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Well, that's Free Hong Kong's long since passed, I suppose. There's an opportunity each and every step of the way for companies to say no to China, and they don't do it.
No, I think that's where it has to be, like when we were talking about how people now see more and more people see China as an enemy or like some kind of threat. Like it has to be it has to be so bad for these companies in the U.S. To not cut off that source of money in China or whatever, that they are willing to do it. Like if the alternative is they really, like with Google and Dragonfly, like it's such a bad thing for them that they actually have to stop. Like that's where we have to go.
That was employee revolt, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Employees at Google said no to the Dragonfly. Dragonfly was that?
Yeah.
And good on them. And I wish employees at Nike and the NBA would. I mean, if you had a bunch of NBA like real stars who said, we got to condemn what's happening there, then there'd be enough public pressure that there couldn't be much the NBA would do.
LeBron James needs to call out genocide.
Right. And it's fine to, like, I have no problem with basketball players using their fame to talk about political issues in the US. What's happening in China is so bad that, like, if you even talk about it in China, you get arrested. So you can't criticize your own government inside China. It's a very different situation. But I think the overall looking at why is the Chinese Communist Party so powerful and how have they gotten so much power in the last 20 years? It's all because of foreign investment. It's partly just the money directly, like investing in Chinese bonds, investing in Chinese companies and that sort of thing. But it's also the foreign companies coming in, giving their technology, allowing Chinese companies to learn from and even steal a lot of this technology and outcompete these industries. And then it's us buying those knockoff products back here in the US. So that whole economic system is the fundamental core of that is foreign companies, especially US companies, engaging in that market. So to the degree that you can cut off the foreign company or American company interaction with China, that's the degree to which we're going to be able to rein in that authoritarian power. And we have to focus there. But it's clear that even the Trump administration, which seemed to really want to do it, was unable to achieve a whole lot with that. Well, it's going to take a lot more Google Dragonfly situations where people working here who have that power as employees, empower as citizens and as media to say, we're not going to tolerate our companies working with a genocide dictatorship.
Also, consumers not buying products made in China. Like,
Don't
it has
go to an NBA game.
Yeah, like it has to.
Yeah.
The other thing that the U.S. government could do was what the Trump administration started doing, like actually putting Chinese companies that work with the Chinese military on entity lists, like blacklisting them. So
getting them delisted from the stock exchanges.
yeah, so soon there are going to be a big bunch of big Chinese companies that can't trade on Wall Street anymore.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.